Past players, past legends, past legends.
And tonight we're pleased to have on the line Craig Burton, current CEO of the North Adelaide Footy Club. Craig, 43 games for West Adelaide between 82 and 86, 48 goals, and then transferred to North Adelaide, 87 and 92, 129 games, 239 goals, dual premiership player for the Roosters. And, of course, he did kick that one goal in 89. We'll have to get a mention, Craig, but welcome aboard, Berts.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for having me.
Not a problem, mate. What we like to do with most of our guests is get a little bit of a background as to where you started your juniors, and we'll go from there, mate.
Sure. So junior footy for me probably started at St Leonard's Primary School down at Glenelg. Our family lived pretty close to the Bay Area, so most of my youth was brought up in that area. So playing for St Leonard's Primary and then off to Plimpton High School for my secondary education, played for the school. Didn't really have a local club, which is unusual. West Adelaide had obviously their junior grades special squad, so I went through that, and they actually had an under-15 team that they entered in the old Glenelg South competition. So we were playing against teams like Marion, Camden, etc. On a Sunday. So once that finished, then I was into the under-17 and under-19 program at Westies. So that's sort of my junior footy as a summary.
Yeah, we will take a step back there. You knew I wasn't going to allow a certain individual to escape. But going back to your days at St Leonard's with Mace, and then, of course, at Plimpton with one of the good guys of footy in Jamie Mason and Glenelg and North Adelaide. So you played with Mace at school. But what we all are also after, now come on, we want you to give us some dirt on the current Norwood football the team manager of the Millennium, Mark Robinson. Give us some dirt about Robbo's sporting ability and Robbo at school, please. And I did warn him that I was coming for him, so go, mate.
Okay, so Robbo, he comes from good stock because his dad played quite a few games down at Glenelg, and he was a mad Bay supporter, as I was back then. So we had that in common. As far as footy prowess goes, Robbo, he was a good forward pocket back in the day at Plimpton High. We didn't let him out of there too often, but no, he was a great fella and a good friend through my school days, and sort of reconnected a bit when he popped up at Norwood.
And got to be fair there. Look, we've got to give his dad a proper mention. His dad, the late John Robinson, is one of only 4 players in SANFL history to play in premierships at all 4 grades in terms of back then, junior Colts, senior Colts, reserves and league. And that was for Port Adelaide. And then back then when you move, you then played for that club you moved to. So John is the only person who is a life member of the Port Adelaide and Glenelg football clubs, and he's also a legend in the Glenelg Hall of Fame for not only his playing but administrative work. So he's actually a huge name in South Australian footy, John. So yeah.
Yeah, that huge effort that was, and I think Robbo, he was a bit more diligent at the schoolwork than I was. I probably must have spent a bit more time on the sporting field, maybe.
Yes. Well, you've probably got him covered these days, though, mate.
Oh, I don't know about that, but they're good days. We had some great guys go through Plimpton High back in the day. I think a good friend of mine, Clayton Lamb, went through school with Clayton. And before then, Leon Grosser, I think Craig Marriott might have gone through, Greg Summerton, Keith Coleman. So a lot of players that played at Westies and Glenelg, ex-Plimpton High students.
There's certainly a West Adelaide and Glenelg connection there, isn't there?
There is. So. It's on the border. Although I lived in Glenelg North, I was on the edge of the Glenelg boundary, so that was the West Adelaide zone. Yep. So quite a few people in that area. Yeah.
So were the 15s back then, or was that a little too early?
So when you,
Sorry?
so did you play 15s
Yeah.
for Westies
For
then?
Westies, yeah.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I don't know how they did it, but West Adelaide created an under-15 team
Yeah.
that played in the Glenelg South competition. So I think we might have even won the premiership in that year, and it was really good in that so the nucleus of that under-15 side went on to play under-17s the following year and for the next couple of years. So it was a good lead into junior footy at SANFL level.
And and then when you went to Westies, of course, 82 to 86, and you were there in their one glory year, which I still say is the most powerful forward line I've seen in SANFL footy history in terms of balance with Luders, Lindner, Muret, Morrison, Grosser, Conlon. It was an incredible
That
side.
team would have given some AFL/VFL teams a run for their money.
In terms of especially forward power.
Yeah.
So you debuted in 82 with Westies, Craig?
Yeah, I did, and yeah, it was a great place to be around. Our junior teams, we probably played finals, but we didn't really go on with it at 17s and 19s level. So in my under 19 year, I think it was, which was 82, I played an under 19 game and got reasonably lucky and kicked a few goals, and then got promoted to the reserves the following week, and then once again kicked a few goals, and then I think it was Mike Smith got reported in 82 in the league side, and Neil Curley promoted me to my first game, which was at Albert Oval against Port Adelaide, in 82.
Well, speaking of Curls, tough taskmaster, obviously from afar, but as a coach, what's he like, mate?
Yeah, look, he was great. He was sort of feared, like as a young 18-year-old. You sort of don't, go up to your coaches too often and seek feedback. You sat there, you shut your mouth and just did what you were told, really. And if you got dropped, you just took it on the chin and went back and did your best and hoped that you got a recall. So it's changed a lot. Feedback wasn't even invented back then, I don't think.
You just did as you were told, basically.
Well, and you knew if you got it wrong, you'd have got a fair old spray at the same time.
And I think my first game, I started all right. I think I was lucky enough to kick a goal with my first kick, but I also remember trying to handball over the top of Kim Kinnear and him running straight through me, and I don't think I went near the ball after that.
So how many games did you play in 83 then in the Westies Premiership year?
Yeah, so 83 was a really interesting year. I played in the 4 trial matches leading into the season, and the 4th one I got pretty sick during the game. I just started feeling lightheaded, and it was diagnosed as hepatitis.
Oh, wow.
So I probably didn't play for the next, let's say 10 weeks.
Yep.
Recovering from that, and then basically couldn't get inside. Just played in the reserves for the rest of the year, and by the end of the year I was feeling really good. Trained with the team throughout the season, and I remember training in grand final week. That was like a game. Big crowd at the ground, and like you said, it was a pretty star-studded team, and I reckon from memory they used about 28 players that year. So it was a tough team to get into, but a really good team.
And so keep going with your Westies career then from there. And, of course, Westies drew incredible. I think most of us thought, well, Westies are going to be up for a fair while, but they fell right away really quickly. And, for the ability they had was a bit bizarre.
It was. And on reflection, there was a lot of players were recruited from interstate, and players that probably were fringe VFL players back then, like Mark Dreer, Mike Smith, Bernie Conlon, to name a few. Richard Hamilton, I think, was one of them.
Yep.
They were great players at Westies and probably didn't go on with it. I think in 84, not sure if they even made the finals. And then it was, and then North Adelaide started to come through, and Glenelg were pretty strong, as you know. So it sort of dropped off a bit, and then Curls finished up, I think, at the end of 84, and John Cale came in, and I think we played in a few. Might have even played in a prelim when John was coaching in '85. But after that, it was not as high achieving. Yeah.
Well, what made the decision then
good
to
call.
change to North Adelaide? Because it wasn't a done thing very often. Most guys stayed with one club. There weren't that many guys transferred back then. So it's a big decision to change clubs. What caused that?
Look, it was, and I didn't have a father figure to help me sort of navigate my contracts and agreements, etc., whatever you want to call them. So I did that myself, and I was working in a business that sold sports and medical supplies. So we supplied the strapping tape to a lot of clubs, and I was seeking a little bit of business from Westies, but unfortunately, the then general manager Doug Thomas wouldn't see it the same way I did, and it sort of negotiations fell apart a little bit, and I was a bit pig-headed too. So I said, "Oh well, I'll see what else is around," and one thing led to another, and a conversation developed through Michael Flynn, who was at North Adelaide, and obviously the coach Mike Noonan, and it went on from there. And that's where I spoke to a couple of other clubs, but that's where I ended up.
What other clubs did you speak to? I'm trying to remember whether we featured, or whether Nord featured there or not, Craig.
No, they didn't. I think a club down south, and one club that amalgamated with someone called West Torrens, and the Glenelg boys came in a bit late, but but I was really comfortable with what North Adelaide were doing. They were a pretty good side, so
they were.
You could say it was a little bit risky going into a good side, but Mike was pretty astute with what he wanted, and he felt that what I could offer would help the team, hopefully. Yeah.
And of course, you fell into you picked a good year to join North Adelaide, mate.
Yeah, I sure did. It was an interesting year, and I've spoken to, like, Stephen Sims came in the same year, and John Roberts, and we all noticed at the start there was a fair bit of hunger, and they were not going to let anything get in the way of achieving success that year after the previous 2 years.
So just to remind us of a couple of players that were around then. I reckon there's a Darren Jarman and a Andrew Jarman floating about at that stage.
Oh, the D Jarman goal with the left foot in the forward pocket. That's still one of the all-time great goals. So
it was. Look, it was pretty handy first ruck. Redden to Hart to D Jarman, and then A Jarman in the middle as well. Yeah. So it was pretty handy. And then John Roberts kicked 100 goals that year. Fairly reasonable defence with Paul Arnold and Trevor Clisby marshalling the troops down there, and the late Mike Parsons thrown in for a bit of a chop out in the ruck. Yeah.
He kicked 6 in the grand final too, didn't he? I reckon Parsons,
or might have even maybe 7. I think
6 or 7. Yeah. And of course, Wilds is still very understandably shattered that he missed out with a pretty average injury against West Adelaide late that year as well.
He let us know about it on the podcast here as well.
That's one thing Wilds has always been very dark about.
Where were you initially playing in that side? Were you're in the forward pocket or
half forward?
Half forward.
Yeah, no, just traditional sort of half forward role. I'm pretty that game I was on David Grenville pretty much the whole game, and I really didn't feature too highly in the stats as far as numbers go. I think I might have had 5 kicks. But managed to kick 3 goals.
Yeah, you got 3 goals, yep.
And it was like the coach sort of put it on a few players in the forward line, that defensive sort of mindset. If the player was there to be tackled, you had to tackle him. And I remember, might have been lucky, I think Peter Carey ran into me and I just held on and pinged him holding the ball. So I thought, hell, that's... how'd I get on hold of this bloke?
Fair play to grab hold of, super. Yeah.
Climb aboard and hope for the best.
Yeah, pretty much. That was it.
So how, and in terms of North Adelaide, first premiership there for a while and all that, how was that amongst the Rooster faithful? And the Grog squad would have been an interesting mob to get involved with too, Berts.
Sorry, fellas, that just dropped out.
That's all right. Just saying, North Adelaide's first flag for a while, and of course we've got a few famous supporters in the grog squad, and that it don't mind a drollop to celebrate. That would have been a bit of fun.
Yeah, they're still around, a few of those guys, and they're a great part of the North Adelaide banter, I think, on a match day.
Yeah.
So obviously success in '87. What ended up happening to the Roosters in '88, mate?
Yeah, interesting one. I think they had 3 really good years of playing in grand finals, and there was just a few games that got away from us, and we didn't. I think we finished 6th out of the 5. So it was just one of those inconsistent years that maybe the personnel were pretty much the same, but we just couldn't do it consistently.
And then with '89, yeah, we all know what happened in the end result and that, but it was quite bizarre in terms of, I reckon the minor round game between North Adelaide and North and Port, the minor round where I think it was meant to be at Alberton and got switched to Footy Park, 25,000 there, and the Roosters get up in a cliffhanger. That would have been like a final as it was. And come the grand final, I think it was probably as excited as I've ever been as a neutral to go to a game to think this is going to be a bloody great game. You haven't got the stress of your side playing, and then it was just bizarre what happened. How did you sort of reconcile that? I know.
Well, almost quarter by quarter, because it
was just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. You're right. That I think it was Father's Day.
Yes,
September,
that's
September.
right.
Was a big crowd, Footy Park on a Sunday, and great game. It would have been, I don't know, I can't remember the exact scores, but both teams kicked probably close to 20 goals each, and we held on for a win. So we thought, look, we went into the finals thinking we were good enough, pretty experienced group. But the reflection is we probably went in with a few players that were injured and took a risk, thought we should be all right. And I think a couple of our players were targeted and didn't quite have any influence on the game, I guess, unfortunately, and that happens. And then the conditions were pretty average. We think we went into the win for 3 quarters, but we probably still didn't get our hands on the footy enough to hit the scoreboard either. So, Port just outplayed us that day.
And then wouldn't you? I don't think you would have even thought of it at the time. You've just got annihilated. You've kicked a goal and whatever. And wouldn't it really come to, as all the jokes came out later, 1 goal in mind, and you're remembered as the bloody poor prick who kicked the 1 goal, mate?
Pretty much. It's one of those things that, it doesn't go down as your proudest moment in football, but it's there and you deal with it, and that's the way it goes. And, we probably had another, I think we kicked 1 goal 8, so we had another 8 chances to kick goals, but it just so happened that none of them went through for whatever reason.
As a supporter of it.
I was going to say an interesting story on that day. I knew it wasn't going too good when I had a free kick. I think someone kicked on the full in the forward pocket, and Greg Phillips stood the mark, and I thought I'll try and run around him, just take off, and went to take off, and I think he must have read it right, and he basically ran into him and bang, holding the ball, and that was it. Yeah, so I thought this is not going to be a good day.
What was the feeling like in the rooms afterwards? Obviously, it's not something that you see every day. Is it a case of everyone's just a bit bewildered, shell-shocked? Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of that. You know what? You sometimes don't keep those sort of memories too close to you.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And I can't. I'd have to. And I haven't even rewatched the game or anything. And I think I can't really recall it, but it was definitely a bit of shock and embarrassment more than anything.
Yeah, don't worry, I wouldn't have watched it ever again either, mate.
No, that's fair call.
So you go through, and then of course 91. Now you've played. That is probably the most infamous grand final in South Australian footy history in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
not that I think you were involved in any of that side of it, Craig, but what's your recollections there of that game in terms of the Bloodbath Grand Final?
What was it? A bit of a preconceived plan to be aggressive, but obviously not that aggressive?
No. Look, I think one of the learnings that Mike Noonan had out of all the grand finals is you've got to be aggressive and you've got to set the tone. So that's a normal grand final approach. But it was certainly nothing, it was all within the rules. But the whole thing started with some tagging tactics that West Adelaide employed. And then give them credit, they came from the elimination final. So they played a few finals and were playing pretty good footy. But and umpires were told, if so-and-so doesn't stop, hanging on when I'm going for the ball, I'm going to have to, take it into my own hands sort of thing. And really that's pretty much what happened. And then after the incident, over in the half-forward flank below the scoreboard there, it sort of blew out from there. And, we just kept playing the way we know we got to play and got the result, I guess.
Yeah, as you know, for as much as what Stephen Sims did was pretty average, he had copped a fair bit from Simpson, and I don't think he meant to get him the spot he did, and then snowballed a bit from there. And I did think out of that, in all fairness to you guys, that Westies did get pretty frustrated when you guys were well in front, and it just kept snowballing a bit. And there was a bit of retaliation, and it wasn't, but it was just, in the end, a very one-sided game of which you guys get the chocolates.
Yeah, like the Simsy does. He was, let's say, railroaded into the fence at Prospect Oval during a game against Westies earlier in the year, and there was a little bit of retaliation there for that. But certainly, he even admits, he couldn't hit anyone that sweet, even if he tried. It was just one of those moments that it happened. And you could even go back to 87. I think we were talking about David Wildy before. I think it was Glenn Goss.
Glenn Goss, yep.
Tackled him and buried his shoulder into the ground and dislocated his shoulder. And footy accidents and incidents happen. You can go back as far as Curly, and wasn't there a Nord player?
Damien Nygaard, yep.
Yeah, so they're everywhere, and you move on and go to the next game.
So at about that time there, the Crows were coming into the competition. How, from your point of view, obviously North Adelaide representative at the time, how did you guys deal with that as a club and as a team with players potentially coming back and forth?
It was an interesting era, and we had half a dozen or maybe even more in the initial squad that trained, like players like Peter Bennett, Trevor Clisby, Daryl Hart, Andrew Jarman, a few that were invited to train. They had a big squad, and I reckon all the coaches in the Sandful then didn't really enjoy players coming back and forth. And our coach was the same, but it was all new territory, and you just had to deal with it the best you can. So we did, and it ended up being a good year for us. And I think Westies got Mark Micken back as well in '91 for their grand final. So and a young Tony Modra played as well. I'm not sure if he was on the Crows list then, but
after that,
it might have been after. But you dealt with it. Was it ideal? Probably not, but it was a new frontier, and you just had to do the best you could.
Had the body catch up with you towards the end of '92? Then, Craig?
Yeah, I think so. I kept doing soft tissue injuries, some hamstring.
I remember that. Yep.
And probably it was a good time to probably say goodbye. The coach had finished his tenure as the coach as well, so it was a whole new era forming. I was quite happy to hang up the boots, although I did put them back on and have a season down at Victor Harbour a couple of years later, which was a bit of fun.
Was that with the Glenelg boys, with Simo and those guys?
Yeah. Simo, he'd left, but Ross Gibbs went down there, and Clayton Lamb went down there as well, and Peter Reid from Sturt was playing. He's a Victor boy.
Yep.
So it was a good little side. Yeah.
We haven't asked many of our guests this question, but what are your thoughts between the local league and the SANFL at that stage? Because there's some pretty handy players running around in the amateurs at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think the new age for players moving on has dropped a lot.
Yes.
Players in their sort of mid to late 20s are thinking, do I want to continue playing SANFL or do I go and play in the country and earn a few dollars? So
it's the time commitment. You don't have the old guys in the reserves, and okay, it's easy for me as a Nord man just to think of people off the top of my head. But you don't get a Roger Murdoch who played 100 league, 100 reserves games, Gary Menzel, Andrew Jarvis, Wayne Schmal, those sort of guys just aren't. You don't have anyone in the reserves of that experience anymore. Like, I do the scoreboard for the Nord home games, and the reserves competition now is nearly a kids' competition. It's, you basically 21, 22. It's actually unusual to even have someone 23 or 24 in the reserves nowadays.
Yeah, no, you're right. The competition, we look as a footy club, it's development. We've got to provide the AFL with players, otherwise our competition could become irrelevant. So that's still a really high focus. But we want to get the kids through and get them playing league footy for North Adelaide or whoever, Nord. And the older guys that aren't getting a run are, certainly filtering out to the amateurs and country leagues.
And what was that like for you going back there?
It was good fun, yeah. Yep. To country footy, I just never experienced anything outside of a league club, so
yeah.
I thought this would be great, and then it was. I only did it for a year, but really enjoyed it, and still got lots of friends down at Victor Harbour that I catch up with every now and again when I'm down there. And it was good to play. We played down there this year against South Adelaide.
Oh, you did too, yeah, that's right, yeah. Footy-wise, since then too, you also had a stint coaching Glenelg under-19s, Craig?
Yeah, I did. 204, 205. So I was runner before that at the Crows. So I started doing some work at the Crows in 99. I was runner for Blighty in his last year, and then for Ayresy for about 4 years after that, and then went into coaching in 204 and 205.
Because you'd worked at Cooper's previously, hadn't you?
Yes, yeah. I was at Cooper's Brewery for about 10 years from 95 to end of 204. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff Wilson, and that would have had a crack at me if I didn't get Cooper's mention, mate, as you know.
It's a good drop.
Yes.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe.